Welcome to the Stories in EDU podcast, the show where we talk with real educators and hear their powerful impact. Their stories will grab you, inspire you, and show you the reach of the work we do. And now, the Bretzman Group presents your hosts, Josh Gauthier and Mandy Taylor.
Welcome back to Stories in EDU. Glad to have you listening to our podcast once again. We hope that you're finding a lot of enjoyment and maybe some inspiration from the teacher stories we've been sharing, and we're very excited to keep bringing those to you and super excited about the one we have tonight. Mandy, how are things going with you right now?
It's going really well. I just am kind of surprised that we're already this far in. I've had such a great time meeting all the different educators we've had on so far and just kind of learning how so many of us have these weird connections, that it's like, oh, I have a 14-year-old son. Oh, I taught for that same amount of years. There's just been so many different connections that we've been able to make. And I continue to just be kind of, maybe humbled is the word, just by the enormity of the education field that is out there on social media, and just that I've been able to connect with people that are outside of my daily life, but that I'm just kind of learning from and growing. And I'm so excited about Tara tonight and how just getting more of this broader perspective. It's just been such a neat way to connect. So
totally
I'm great.
Yeah, I mean, there's that.
Fine.
You're fired up, which sounds great.
I guess so. I don't know what just happened.
Yeah.
Was this a pulpit? I don't know.
I watched the show Touch a while back. Kiefer Sutherland starred it. Really cool show. Went off the rails a bit in season 2, but season 1 they really focused on like that connection, that we're all connected in these different ways, and it's neat to be able to explore those. And I think there's something very human about that, and that it's fun to explore. So happy to bring on our next human. We're going to bring on Tara Linney from the, I can't even say great state because she's currently not in a state. She's in Singapore, joining us from the future. Tara, how are you doing today?
Now.
I'm great today.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about where you're at, because it's kind of an interesting place, and I think we'll kind of dive into more about how you ended up there.
Yeah, so I'm currently residing in and working in a little country called Singapore. We're about half the size of Rhode Island, for those of you who know the geography of the United States. And it is a city-state country island unto itself.
Oh, I didn't realize that about Singapore. I thought Singapore was, I kind of like Indonesia. I feel like it's somewhere in there, and I'm totally off, aren't I?
Actually, you're really not. So what happens with Singapore is that it's attached to, but it's a part of this archipelago with Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And they surround us. So it's really, really nice is whenever there's really bad weather, the equivalent of a hurricane, we don't feel the effects because it hits all the other countries. And so we're the safe little infant child amidst all of the other islands.
That's fascinating.
It's neat how geography plays into so many different things like that we don't know because we're not there. So that's cool that you can share that with us.
Definitely. And one thing, my taxi driver in Connecticut over the summer, thought that Singapore was in Mexico. It's in Asia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I at least knew more than that.
Yeah. And it's not in China, but it used to, there used to be a connection there because China's really old. And it's been a country for 62 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're at the Singapore American School over there, right? Is that the name of it?
Yes, I currently am.
And we can talk a little more about what's next for you after that. But let's start with the prequel to that, in that, how did you end up over there? I think for most of us American-based teachers, it's kind of been, we've been here and we might move around in our state. Maybe occasionally some of us move across the country. And of course, after saying that, I know at least 2 teachers who have taught abroad for several years. So I'm blowing away my own theory there. I haven't. So how did you end up in Singapore?
The short answer is Twitter.
Wow.
Now
Now I'm getting nervous.
Oh.
And,
Go
and
ahead.
the long answer is?
So the long answer is I was at a school just outside of Chicago, and I had just started there, and it was October of that first year. And I was on Twitter one day and just kind of scrolling through, and I saw this job posting and favorited it, and then asked a question, like a public question on the tweet, and got a response back, and then applied for the job and got it. That's a slightly longer story.
So that just like that. So it was a job posting by somebody who was there or by the school account?
So that's the really cool thing. So like this is a very connected, well, actually most international environments are like very connected, like people know people and people use social media and it's pretty cool. So Jay Atwood, who used to be at the school, he was the high school ed tech coordinator for several years. He had posted the tweet on, I believe, like October 30th or something. And then I favorited it. And then when I posted the question, he responded back and it was just like, when does your school year start? Because of course, that's the most important question, right?
Right,
And so he responded back and then I applied and I guess about 6 weeks later went through the interview processes and got the job. And I didn't know Jay Atwood in person, but we were connections on Twitter, and we were also part of the Google, what is now the Google Certified Innovators community.
That is amazing to think about. Yes, in some ways, like how important the connections were, but in some ways, how simple it was to just make that leap. But of course, the devil's in the details, as they say. So like you applied the job and you got it. What was it like? And we could talk a little bit about, you know, some of the different places that you've taught previously before Chicago, but what was it like to make that jump to an international environment versus an American environment?
Well, I guess it was pretty easy in the sense that the hardest thing was moving to a different country because prior to moving to Singapore, I had never left the U.S. for any reason. I mean, one time I went to Canada to see the other side of Niagara Falls, but that was for like 2 hours. So... and they didn't stamp my passport. And I also didn't really like drive that far. Anyhow, so then when I moved to Singapore, it was like, whoa, like this is a whole new country. One of the national languages is English, and so communication has been pretty easy. Yeah, but it's an American school, so like the curriculum, it's Common Core and everything, all of the stuff that we did back in the U.S. is being done here.
Fascinating. Are there, and you may not know the answer to this, I'm just asking this off the top of my head, but you know, I've heard that there's the blank American schools in a lot of different places. Is that a common thing in a lot of other countries, that there's these American schools, and who is the primary audience that fills those places?
So most countries will have an American school. From what I've seen thus far, there will be like at least 1 or 2 American schools per country, and definitely per major city within that country. And that's all over the world, like all over the world. Sometimes they're like American international schools. Sometimes they're international schools. But mostly you'll be able to find at least 1 American school that follows the American curriculum. What was the other part of the question?
The audience.
The audience.
Yeah, who goes there?
Like in terms of students?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they tend to be, the schools tend to be private independent schools. So you have basically the equivalent of like a private independent school in the U.S. would have like your corporate kids, your business owners, your embassy kids, like things like that.
Interesting. So in reality, now that we've kind of wrapped our way to this end of the discussion, it probably wasn't that different at all, was it?
There were a lot of things that were different and challenging. Yeah, but in terms of like what's actually taught, no. Not really not a big shift from like at least my experiences in the U.S.
Fascinating. We had one of my colleagues, probably over a decade ago, had actually taught in Japan. I know she taught in Japan. I think she taught in Slovenia or somewhere in there too, and we had discussed some of the differences in how those cultures see things. But it sounds like this is an American school, so it's very much more American culture, correct?
No.
Okay.
American curriculum. So American curriculum, some American traditions like our Thanksgiving like spread is like amazing. Same kind of like holiday schedule, like for the major, like more religious oriented holidays or historic ones. But in terms of culture, like we've got students from all over the world, and that tends to be the case in American schools. Like you won't just have students from that country or American students, but like you'll have third culture kids who come from totally different backgrounds from their parents. You'll have kids who travel every couple of years and go from one country to another. So it's like it's a very diverse environment.
Right.
Let me ask you, Tara, you mentioned the Google Innovators program. How does that play out into what you're doing now? I mean, just the idea of being an innovator. Like for me personally, I know that to leave what's familiar would certainly be an innovative concept for me. So my question is other than just, yeah, I utilize Google tools and things like that, the Innovators program is a little bit more, I'm just saying, like, what does that look like in terms of how comfortable you are experiencing things that are new, that educators may be terrified of?
So I would say that the innovator program doesn't like define you as like an innovator. Like it doesn't like shift who you are on the inside. What it does do though is that it provides you with like the tools that you need to succeed in what you want to succeed in. Like for example, when I was en route to Singapore, like before I actually got here, I reached out to like the innovator community to see like, okay, who's been to Singapore, who lives here, and it's more for that connections aspect. And not just around like, tools, but like learning places and having somebody that you know in some form or fashion in that place that you're going to.
I would agree, yes.
Go ahead.
So actually, a little known backstory here, Tara and I were actually in the same cohort for, it was then the Google Teacher Academy. So we got to hang out at the Google Plex, which is an amazing experience. And I would completely second, it's the connections and getting into that tight-knit community. I would say there's so many great things that have come out of the connections to the people in that group. There's certainly things we did while we were together that were interesting that I still harken back to. But I mean, just the fact that, you know, I know Tara and we have that connection, and whenever there's certain things, I know that she knows that I can reach out to her and possibly vice versa. Although she knows a lot, so there's probably not a lot of
you know a lot.
but in any case, but that to me is probably the biggest reason to pursue it. It's difficult. I mean, how many times did you apply, Tara?
So at one point I thought that it was like 5, but I think it was actually 6 times. Yeah, I became like the rejection queen or like the iteration queen. Says it more nicely, I guess.
I like that reframing there.
And it's just kind of a weird thing. I'm not really sure. It really depends on who's reviewing that year and what they're looking for the makeup of the group. And they don't really tell you why they picked you. You just kind of end up there and you look around and like, how did they choose me in this group? Like, I don't feel like I belong at all. But that's the amazing thing is like you're surrounded by such amazing people that are super passionate, always pushing to the next thing. And that's what makes it really, really worthwhile.
Definitely.
So consider it. I don't think they've announced for this year yet any of the things, have they?
No, they just finished one in South America. But you're right. I don't think that they've done 2018 yet.
All right, so stay tuned. I mean, it's very, very early yet in the year. So that'll be exciting to see where they go with those. It's been nice to see them get to a lot of different locations. But I'm super glad we got to go to Mountain View.
Yeah.
So is your plan to stay in Singapore long term, or was your commitment for a year? Was it for longer than that? Like what, I'm just so fascinated. I think probably because of, my kids and where they are in school and the idea of travel for extended periods of time for me seems so kind of outside. So I'm fascinated by the process of that you were like, yeah, I'll move in 6 weeks. Like what? You're planning.
Yes, I came in on a 2-year contract, and then like they renew like on a yearly basis. But of course that always changes too. And so actually I put my notice in at the beginning of this year. This is my 3rd year that I wasn't going to be coming back. And so I guess I don't have long-term plans for Singapore. It's a really, really great place though. Like it's close to other places. It's a very innovative like country to be in. Yeah, I work with some pretty cool people and yeah.
That's so neat. So so then you come back to where you're from here, or what's the next stage for you?
So I'm not really I'm not really, the word from is very tricky because I'm not really from anywhere. Like I don't have like a hometown per se because my parents were in the Coast Guard, so we'd move around all the time.
Okay.
And actually, I just got a job in Paris.
Okay.
And so from here, I'll be homeless for 2 months over the summer, which will actually be a lot of fun. Like I'll have the opportunity to travel a lot. And then I'll move to Paris in August.
Okay.
Wow.
That's fascinating.
Can you reveal like what it is that you'll be doing there? Is it going to be a similar tech coordinator type role or something else?
Yeah, it'll be similar. Definitely more length of responsibility in terms of multiple grades to work with. Yeah, I'm excited.
Very cool. It'll be very interesting to talk to you about that. Is it an American school as well that you're going to there?
Of course.
Is there like a connection amongst them all that they're all together, or is it very independent?
It's very independent. It's very independent and competitive.
Cool. Well, I mean, kudos to you to be able to not only do that, but I think that they're getting somebody who's high quality as well. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about those experiences and how all of that goes. I mean, there's so much I don't know in terms of how things work outside of this country that I'm always kind of thirsty to hear more about that because I like it here. I'm very comfortable where I'm at here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but I always kind of think about what else is out there. It's a pretty big world.
It really is. I went driving for the first time outside of the U.S. like ever in New Zealand last week and like survived like out of almost 300 kilometers. I did like 299 kilometers on the correct side of the road. There's only one time that I was driving. Yeah.
I would not survive. I would not survive.
It makes you more aware of your surroundings. Like your brain has to be on while you're driving. You can't just like doze off and start singing. Well, I mean, I was still singing, but like you can't like, just go into zombie mode like you can in the US. So like there's definitely no multitasking aside from the singing, which really isn't multitasking, but like I wasn't looking at my phone. The roundabouts were a little bit tricky. Yeah, but yeah, it's a really cool experience. I feel like I could do it again so long as I'm in a country that has lines on the road.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. For
so
those
in your interviews, you're always like, do you have lines on your road? When they're like, how many questions for us?
These are the important
What's the road look like? Can you see a picture?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For non-metric people, that's about 170 miles, I think, or roughly the distance from like Green Bay to pretty close to Chicago.
Yeah.
You probably get to the border from Green Bay in 170 miles. So do that drive often, so I have that down. Goes pretty fast. Well, Tara, this is all fascinating, and what I hate is that we can't go forever because nobody wants to listen. Well, this one they would, but I think for most cases nobody wants to listen to like a 3-hour long podcast. So we try and keep it as commute friendly as possible. So I think we're going to start to wrap up, but would you be open to coming back sometime? Maybe once you're kind of inserted into Paris and getting comfortable there, and we can hear more about how that's going?
Definitely, but I'll have to forewarn you, like at this rate, I might be speaking fluent French by then. I mean, not fluent. It won't be perfect. But yeah, sure.
Merci
I would
beaucoup.
love to do this in French. This would be great because I don't know French, so that would be great. That would be so fun. That gives me something to build up to work
I know un petit français.
We could start a Duolingo club.
Yes.
My son is doing Duolingo in French, so he could join. My 14-year-old could join you, but I could not.
Yeah, my wife has already started. I have not downloaded the app yet, so I got to get on that. I mean, we're only going to be there for like
on that.
3 days, but I want to feel comfortable. I mean, I want to know something. I don't want to rely on like Google Translate or forcing people to explain everything in English to me. So we'll do our best to prep.
Well, if you need any help with that, let me know. I'm not an expert, but happy to learn with you guys.
Excellent. Well, the more the merrier, and then we can have little discussion groups. Or we can have petite discussion groups. Maybe we can have a petite discussion group over a petite déjeuner.
Or a baguette with some beans.
You might have baguettes for a petite déjeuner. I think that's breakfast, but I'm not sure.
I haven't gotten to the food section yet.
Déjeuner is dinner. So petite déjeuner is like little dinner, which could be lunch, but could be breakfast. I don't remember. French was like 12 years ago. So
I just know my son was excited because he did enough. I guess you earn like gems or something, like little, okay. So one day he was like, Mom, I got enough gems to open the flirting pack. And so he got enough gems that now he can flirt in French, which was, it was actually, I thought, genius marketing for the teenage sect to give him that opportunity because he was really excited about getting to unlock that pack. It's like awesome.
Definitely.
He's not even taking French. It was just for fun because he thought it was cool. So
just don't let him watch Lady Marmalade. Like when I first found out about the job, I started singing that song and then somebody was like, you know what you're saying, right? Like, it sounds really cool.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
No.
Just like a bunch of prospective Spanish students are going to find out about Despacito. So.
Right. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
All right.
Well,
man, multicultural stuff is great. And man, we should have asked Duolingo to like sponsor this prior to when you're back next time. We'll make sure we'll get on that.
Totally.
All right. So we have reached the part in the show where we do our personalized PD game of stories cards. There are 52 great prompts for you to use with your staff and other colleagues to just generate some good discussions. They're awesome at ed camps. Mandy's done a conference session on it. Just a great way to generate good discussions and share stories in a quick fashion. You can get them off Amazon. Just sharing it because I think they're pretty awesome. So how this will work is, of course, because Tara is our guest, she gets to go first. I am going to read the card, and this is what we'll be telling some quick stories about. Here we go. The card says, present it well. Tell a story about how you used a presentation tool or technique that was non-traditional. Was it more engaging? Were students able to learn in the absence of insert name of slideshow here? What tools did you use? And kind of take it from there.
Okay. Is it okay if it's not super techy?
100% okay.
Okay. So I rewrote the lyrics to A Whole New World, and I sang it during a keynote a cappella.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing?
Uh-huh.
Like, that's awesome. So what was the keynote about, and what was the parody about, and is there a video?
I'm sure there's always a video. I just don't know where it is. I'm also not going to run for public office, so we'll probably never see it. But it was something like, you can show them the world, countries, cultures, and it was something like that. But I won't get too into it now. But it was a global centered theme.
I'm a sucker for a good parody. There's at least one video of me parodying a song out there, so I'm a big fan of that.
Nice.
All right, nice and quick. You can really be very succinct in your stories.
Oh.
It's a good skill for the lightning round.
The timer helps.
It does help. we needed it to happen after like episode 8 when we were having to cut this podcast into like increments because my lightning rounds were not lightning rounds.
Yeah, this is actually episode 52, not 12. That's how long the lightning round was.
Because of my lightning rounds.
Oh, wow.
All right, Mandy, go for it.
Well, I think one of the things that I've done is included today's meet or, some sort of back channel running. Last year at TCEA, we did a panel with on a personalized PD. Jason Bressman came down, Todd Neslony, and Jessica Torres and I, and we really just talked about personalized PD. But we just ran a back channel in the background so the audience was tweeting and, putting in questions and things that we could answer. And so that just made the session, we could tailor it a little bit more to what the teachers really wanted to know about. So I think anytime that there's a way for the audience to kind of get involved with what you're doing, I think it's helpful. I will say it did backfire once. I was presenting in a small district and I put that up there and nobody had brought their phones with them because they thought it was disrespectful. And so it was that one failed.
Nice.
Yes.
Good one. All right. Okay. So I do recall a time where I thought it was super innovative to use Prezi. So I remember that, feeling pretty good about that as a young teacher, like, oh, I'm using Prezi to present with, which Prezi is very cool. And I thought I used it well. And it was neat. It was different than a slideshow. But I would say my favorite way to change an approach for a presentation is to give the participants things to do as we work. So one of the best that I've ever done is I call it the amazing race, and we all do it. And this is actually something that I learned about at our Google Teacher Academy cohort. But essentially the idea is there's some tasks for people to do. They get in groups, they complete tasks, they submit a Google form, it kicks them to their next task, and they're just doing all sorts of different things as we go. And we end up spending 75 to 80% of the session with me not talking and people just doing stuff. And so they really get to model what the students would be experiencing.
Wow. That timer has really changed the game, Josh.
Yes. So quick tip. I mean, if you're listening and you struggle with students getting done on time with certain things in the classroom, throw a timer on the board. Like, it makes a world of difference to have that timer. It's really one of those weird, like, simple things that you wouldn't think would make a big difference, but it really does. Like, having that time, like, hey, we got to be done at this point. So definitely works for us adults, that's for sure. Tara, thanks again for joining us tonight. And if the listeners want to reach out to you, just say, hey, you're awesome, or want to ask questions, where can they find you?
So if you Google me, I'm the first result on like every search. No, just on Google. So Twitter is probably the easiest. And Twitter. Yeah, Twitter.
Are you just at Tara Linney on Twitter?
Yeah, just at Tara Linney.
Okay. And that's
I have a website too.
Linney.
Yeah, it's like Laura Linney, the actress, but Tara.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Well, it was great chatting, great hearing a little bit about what's going on overseas with you. And, maybe that'll inspire some teachers here to take a risk and jump across the pond, or one of the ponds, or both ponds, or as many different bodies of water as they can possibly have the agility to jump over. On behalf of Mandy, it's been great to bring another episode of Stories in EDU. We hope you enjoyed the stories we shared. If you want to reach out to us with any comments, or you want to share some stories on our podcast, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Mr. G Fact of the Day, or Mandy at Mandy M. Taylor. And we look forward to you listening to our next episode. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stories in EDU podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks again.